Welcome to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we break the silence, build community, and ignite hope. We're here to talk about what really matters: mental health, wellness, and the conversations that help us all feel seen and supported. Every episode will bring real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you navigate mental wellness and suicide prevention. Because together, we can change the conversation. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Pelker. Thanks for tuning in to Glow for Hope, Spark Conversation on Mental Health, where we have honest conversations about mental health, identity, and the courage it takes to keep showing up. Today's episode is about power, not the loud, flashy kind, but the kind that helps when someone takes something that once felt heavy and turns it into something strong. My guest today is David Granirer. David is a counselor, stand up comic, author, and founder of Stand Up for Mental Health, a program that teaches stand up comedy to people living with mental health conditions as a way to build confidence and challenge stigma. David himself lives with bipolar disorder and has trained groups in over 50 cities across Canada, the US, and Australia. He's been recognized nationally and internationally for his work, but what stands out most is this idea: once you've done stand up, you can do anything. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So, David, welcome to Glow for Hope.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to start with your story. What you live with bipolar disorder. When
Yeah.
did humor first become part of how you navigated your mental health? And was there a moment when you realized comedy wasn't minimizing your experience, it was actually changing it?
Yeah, so I'll go right back, and then I'll sort of step it up to the present day. So yes, I have bipolar, and it mainly manifests as depression. So the depression began when I was 17, and I attempted suicide, and I ended up in a psych hospital for a period of time. And back then there was no understanding of mental health or mental illness. No one said anything. I wasn't even diagnosed, so they completely failed me. And in actual fact, I was not diagnosed until my 30s. So I went around for close to 20 years with undiagnosed, untreated bipolar slash depression.
Wow.
And so I got out of the hospital, and I basically felt broken. I felt like I would never be whole again. I felt so ashamed, just this horrible, awful shame. I would literally see people I knew previous to being hospitalized walking down the street towards me, and I would run around the corner to hide from them. I did not want to be seen. I would say over and over in my head, I am nothing. I am nobody. I am invisible. And that's how I lived for almost 20 years. I went from being one of those really annoying class clowns to basically vanishing for 2 decades. And what happened was that I began to see a psychiatrist. And I was really against medication. And I want to stop right here and say, medication helped me. It's not for everyone. I am not here to push meds on anyone. But this
Mhm.
is my story and I want to tell it. So, anyhow, I was seeing the psychiatrist, and she kept saying, David, you're depressed. You should go on medication. Like I said, I was really against medication. I thought it was all evil. And basically, if it had been wheatgrass juice, I was, oh, this is awesome. But it was medication, and I didn't want to
Mhm.
go on it. And she kept saying, David, I kept saying, but it'll change my personality. And she's like, yeah, that's the whole point. And so, so finally, I went on meds, and it was like literally within a week. I started to feel better. I was like, oh my God, so this is how normal people feel. They want to get up in the morning, they look forward to the day. And so, like I say, I started to feel better. And around that time, I thought, you know something? I think I want to do stand up comedy. It was like, I guess it was back to being that class clown. And so I started to do stand up. And my first show was at an open mic, and it was awful.
Mhm.
I bombed for 5 minutes. The club was pretty much empty. And I basically bombed for 5 minutes. I thought, okay, I'm never going back. But then I took a stand up comedy course. And the next time I got up, I was ready. I was prepared. The club was packed with all our friends and supporters, and it was amazing. It was like the best high I've ever had. It's free, it's legal, there are no harmful side effects. And I thought, you know something, I just have to do stand-up comedy. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I have to do it. And
Hmm.
so a couple of years later, fast forward a couple of years later, I got asked to teach a stand-up comedy course at a college, a community college. It's a night course. It has nothing to do with mental health, but
Hmm.
occasionally I would see people go through that class and they would have a life-changing experience. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to give this to people who wanted the comedy, but who also wanted the life-changing experience? And so I started Stand Up for Mental Health in 2004. So it's been 21 years since I started it.
So were you already a counselor at that point in time?
Yeah, I was getting I was working for the Vancouver Crisis Center, so I was
Okay.
their trainer, which was an amazing job. I just loved being their trainer, and I had also been getting my counselor training. So basically, I became a stand-up around the same time I was getting counselor training. I remember the Counselor Training Institute where I got my training was like right, like within 30 seconds of a comedy club. So I
Hmm.
used to do my classes and then go to the club and watch amateur night and, go see the headliners on the weekend.
That's great. So you created this program teaching people with mental health conditions how to do stand up. What made you believe this could be transformational? And what happens the first time someone with the diagnosis steps onto a stage with a microphone?
Well, like I say, I knew it could be transformational because I saw it in my community college class. Like I say, I remember one woman took the class and she had a fear of flying. And she said, after the class, she said, I'm not afraid anymore. I
That's
felt like,
awesome.
I got on a plane and I wasn't afraid, which is pretty amazing. And there were other stories like that too. So I knew it could be transformational. And so that's what really gave me the impetus to start this class. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was hoping to do because I mean, that's kind of the way my life has been. I just sort of go, oh, this would be a good idea. So I didn't know what I was doing. I figured, if we get 3 months out of this, that would be great.
Hmm.
And here it is, it's rippled out, and 21 years later, here I am still doing it.
That's awesome. Now you have this saying that once you've done stand up, you can do anything. And
Yeah.
that's a bold statement. So what changes in a person after they've stood in front of a room and owned their story?
Well, I think that's exactly it. So in the class, people go from zero, not knowing anything, to coming out the other end with an act. And I think there's something And I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something about telling your story to a group of people who haven't heard it, where people come out, they laugh and they applaud and they tell you how great you are. And I think there's this moment of, wow, so I can do this. I mean, stand up is the hardest thing in the world.
Hmm.
There's nothing more difficult. They say people would rather die than do public speaking. Well, stand up is one level above public speaking because in public speaking, you have content where you can, if you're funny, it's kind of a bonus. Whereas with stand-up comedy, it's like that's all it is.
Hmm.
So I think people realize that, wow, I did stand up. And what I tell them too is they each get a video of their show. So, tell them when you're having a bad day, just look at the video and realize what you can do.
That's great advice. So one of the most powerful things you say is that doing stand up about your mental health changed the way it sits in your soul. Can you explain that shift and what happens internally when symptoms become setup lines and punchlines? How does that kind of rewire your identity?
Well, I think what it is that there's this cognitive shift that happens when you're able to turn your experience, all that bad stuff, into punchlines. And and it goes from all this horrible stuff to just great comedy material. And what happens is that all of a sudden people come to class and they go, "Oh, I can't wait to talk about that time that I thought the TV was talking to me and telling me to wear a tinfoil hat or whatever it is." And so, like I say, they look forward to bringing that stuff up now, and they never did before for obvious reasons. They were too ashamed, embarrassed,
Mm,
and now they come to class and they have tons of material to draw on.
that's great. It seems, I mean, to have just like this pot of stories that you can turn into
Hmm.
to something is pretty incredible. So, and you even, I mean, you have therapists in the audience. You often invite
Oh yeah.
their therapists and psychiatrists to
Yeah.
attend, and they're like, "Yeah, I never knew that you could do that kind of thing."
Yeah. Yeah, they say to me, I never knew my client could do that. And I think, on the one hand, it's kind of sad that, I think you've been seeing this person for 4 years and you never realized this. And I think that speaks to, I mean, like I said, I'm a therapist and I'm a believer in therapy, but I think it has its limitations. And I think that's one of the limitations is that people come to you with the broken part of themselves and you often don't see their strength and what they can really do out there in the world.
Is that because of the way that the sessions go and the way that you're trained to talk with people, or what do you think causes that?
Well, once again, I think people come to you with the broken part of themselves and you address that broken part of themselves, but and you can sort of go, well, yeah, this person is really funny and all that kind of stuff, and isn't that great? But actually seeing them on stage doing this thing, and I have therapists tell their clients, I could never do what you're doing.
Hmm.
And that's a real big confidence booster for these people. And so, once again, the therapists see their clients in a totally different light. And yeah, you're right. We have, they invite their counselors and psychiatrists and case managers and occupational therapists and whoever they want to invite. And yeah, it just turns into something magical.
I can't. I have watched. I did watch some of your videos and stuff. So they are pretty funny. Do you
Yeah,
describe comedy as a supercharged support group,
yeah.
except instead of respectful silence, people laugh, cheer, tell you how great you are? What is that kind of why is that kind of response so powerful? And what does laughter give that sympathy doesn't?
Well, I think once again, and I'm not putting down support groups. Support groups are wonderful. I mean, I have hear people all the time saying, this group saved my life. So please don't, I want to make sure people know that I'm not putting that down. I think the difference is, and exactly what you said. So at a support group, people listen in respectful silence. And that's great because you're telling your story, you're not being judged. But there's a whole nother level of when you tell your story to a group of people who are not part of your support group, who then laugh and applaud and tell you how great you are. There's just this wonderful high, and there's this wonderful sense of acceptance
Mm.
that you get from having a group of strangers react in the way. Like you sort of go, man, I have just told these people the worst thing about me, and they think I'm great. And what a powerful hit of self-esteem that is.
Yeah, it's got to definitely has to be life changing.
Yeah.
So when someone openly jokes about their diagnosis, what happens to stigma in the room?
Well,
Is the laughter disarming? Does it create safety? Does it open the doors? Does it? My bigger question, I think, is does it open the door for others to ridicule and make fun, which could then have quite the opposite effect?
oh, okay. So first of all, let me back up and say the best compliment I ever had was I heard two guys talking after the show, and one of them said, "That guy with schizophrenia was hilarious." And how often do you hear hilarious and schizophrenia in the same sentence? In terms of, so we're not making fun of mental health. We're telling our stories through mental health. So people come to our shows and they realize there's no ridicule going on. There's no, first of all, we have some ground rules. And one of them is that if you haven't had a certain experience, you can't joke about that experience. So, for example, if you've had ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, that's great. That's wonderful fodder for you. But if I haven't had it, it's not okay for me to make that part of my act because it's not part of my experience and it can sound like I'm being condescending. So, like I say, people come to our shows and they realize that, oh, so there's no ridiculing going on, there's no fun, there's no making fun of, there's no trivializing. So, I think if people have that perception, and some do, um, it's dispelled really quickly when they see us perform.
Hmm. So do you think the, I guess from the audience perspective and how they look at people with mental health or mental health in general, do you really think it changes their perception of it once they step outside that room after the
I
show
think
is
so.
over?
I think so. And it's great at starting conversations. I remember I knew someone who had mental health issues, and kind of how can I put it? The narrative in that family was, oh, this person has mental health issues. They're kind of weird. Um, and this person came to our show, and their they brought their niece.
Mhm.
And afterwards, they were telling me on the way home, they were able to say to this niece, um, that guy with bipolar, I have that. And it was able to start a completely different conversation and, and create some understanding and support where that didn't exist before.
That's great. That's great. So, what is the biggest transformation you've seen in your participants, not just on stage, but how they carry
Yeah.
themselves afterward?
So we had one guy in the class, his name is Robbie, and I'm telling you his story, and it's fine to do that because he was featured in the Voice Award-winning documentary called "Cracking Up" about our program. So none of what I'm telling you is confidential.
Okay.
But when I first met him, he has schizophrenia, and he was just released from a psych institution that he had been in for about 6 months. And he was finally stable, which is awesome because before he was in the institution, he thought he had to drink his own blood and he was hearing demons and it was pretty bad. And he came out, but all he was doing was smoking in his parents' basement and sitting there and watching TV all day, which I mean that's not a life. That's not recovery.
Yeah.
So his mother brought him to one of our shows, and he came up to me afterwards, and it's like he had this big smile on his face. It was like, I think I want to do that, and it was the first thing that had resonated with him since he got out of the hospital. And so he took our class, and the problem was he had failed at everything. I mean, how do you succeed in school when you're sitting in math class with voices telling you to drink your blood and demons telling you all sorts of things? So he was convinced he would fail in our class too. But he succeeded, and he succeeded again and again, and he became one of our stars. So he probably did about 20 or 30 shows with us. And since then, he's become a rapper. He's got a couple albums out,
Oh,
and he said
wow.
it was stand up for mental health that gave him the courage to pursue his dream. And he also gives presentations to police on mental health.
That's awesome. What a transformation. So, there's people listening right now who feel like they're defined by their diagnosis.
Yeah.
And what would you say to someone who feels like their mental health has taken more from them than it's given?
I guess I would say that, and I want to preface this because when you have had that experience, I mean, it's really easy for some person like myself to give you advice. Um, and, I'm really lucky because my symptoms are completely gone when the medication is working correctly.
Mm.
So I don't go around on a regular basis feeling depressed. I mean, I've been on tons of cocktails of medication, and when it's not working, and they kept, they, I mean, I don't know how many meds and cocktails I've been on over the years, and when they're not working, it's pretty bad. Um, but what would I tell people? I guess I would just remind them, something, you are not your diagnosis. And I'm sort of going back and forth, but we talk a lot about strength based in the mental health system, but when you're seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a case manager and a social worker and an occupational therapist and an art therapist, it's really easy to feel like there's something wrong with you. Well, you come to my class because there's something right with you. And I guess what I would remind people is that no matter where you're at and how bleak it seems, there is something right with you. And it's just a matter of finding that thing.
It's beautiful. Very, very hopeful message in there. So tell us how people can find out more about Stand Up for Mental Health and learn more. And I mean, what it go ahead and kind of explain what the program does if you want.
Sure. They can just Google Stand Up for Mental Health. Our website will come up, and there are dozens of videos of comics I've trained throughout Canada, the US, and Australia. And what I tell people is that when you're having a bad day, take a look at some of the videos on our site and realize that these people have been through what you've been through, and look what they're capable of doing. And if they can do it, so can you. And what I tell people too is that I remember one of our comics. They they were institutionalized in their teens. They were out of control. They would scream and yell and break furniture, and they were told they would never leave that institution. Well, here they are, in their mid 20s. They've gone back to school. They just did stand up comedy, the hardest thing in the world. And so I say, never give up on anyone, and never give up on yourself.
Mhm.
And so what I tell people is, when you're having a bad day, or if you know someone that's having a bad day, tell them, I know right now you feel like you may never get better, because that's the whole thing. That's the insidious, awful thing about mental health issues. It's like you're struggling with this voice, or this sneaky adversary that tells you things like, "Oh, you're never going to get better. Just go back to bed. This is too much work. Going to this class or doing this thing, even going to a support group, you don't want to do that." And what I tell them is, take a look at these videos and realize these people have all been through what you've been through, and look what they are capable of doing. And if they can do it, so can you. And maybe stand-up comedy is your thing, because it's not everyone's thing. Some
Mhm.
people, it's a self-select group of people. So it would be, I think, incredibly damaging to be in let's say, an inpatient program, and to say, well, this week we're doing art therapy, next week we're doing stand-up comedy, and to force people who didn't want to do stand-up comedy into doing stand-up comedy. So, like I say, it's a self-select group, but um, uh, you know, take a look at these videos. And so, if these people can do this, well, chances are that you can do something else that's equally amazing.
Mhm. I'd imagine just getting over the fear of standing up in front of people
Hmm.
is a huge thing. I mean, I have a lot of
Hmm.
stage fright. I can
Well,
sit and talk on a mic, or I can be on a
yeah,
panel or whatever, but put me in front
yeah.
of everyone by myself, and it's like, so my lips tighten up, and I just can't
Hmm.
speak. So but overcoming fears is a huge thing for your
Yeah, and
mental
I
health.
think I think what it is too, first of all, uh, by the time we get to the show, they're super well prepared. So each week they bring in jokes, and we try them out in front of the class. So we are the audience for each other. And we look, what worked, what doesn't. And so by the time we get to the show, they have material, and we know it's going to work. There's no, as far as I'm concerned, preparation is the secret of comedy. And there's no, well, just get up there and try and be funny for 4 minutes, and so we know it's going to work. And they've spent time in front of the microphone, so we've worked on timing and performance and delivery, and they can take cheat sheets up there with them. So it's really doable. I mean, it's a huge leap of faith because it's almost like you get to that point where you're prepared, you're ready, and then there's that moment where it's like, oh, now I got to go on stage. And usually what happens is when you get your first laugh, all of a sudden you go from this horrible fear to, oh, wow, this is kind of fun. Uh,
Then the
and so
floodgates open.
yeah, and now it's a matter of you don't want to get off the stage because you're having such a good time. And so, in terms of overcoming your fear, I think when you're well supported and you're prepared, you can overcome your fear and get to that point where you're successful. And like I say, it's really about preparation. So stand-up comedy is mostly written and rehearsed. If you see a comic 2 nights in a row, you'll pretty much see the same thing. So there's no yeah, like I say, there's nothing about, you have to be spontaneously funny. And as a matter of fact, there are people who come into the class and they're like sort of clowns and they make all their friends laugh. And what makes your friend laugh does not work as stand-up comedy because your friends in stand-up comedy, every joke has a setup which establishes the context for the joke. Well, when your friends are with you, the setup is your relationship to your friends. And you don't have that with an audience of strangers, which is why you need to have your jokes properly written and set up so they provide context. Every single joke provides context.
Hmm. So do you guys just continue to like have shows and it's the same people that are, I don't know, like what's the journey after somebody
Oh,
takes your class and then they do, the show at the end of their program and then where do they
well,
go?
well, there's kind of two arms to this. So I do a lot of training of comics in other cities.
Hmm.
And so right now I'm doing a group in New Haven for a place called Fellowship House. And what happens there is the classes are virtual. And then I fly in at the end and we do a show. And for the virtual classes, people not only go to class, they also get a writing session with me on top of that every week. In Vancouver, since I live here, we're lucky we have the luxury. We have a 6 month class, like sort of the beginner class.
Hmm.
And then if people choose to, they can go on to our alumni program, which is for people who want to continue writing and performing. And we do a lot of shows for other organizations to help them raise awareness, at their conferences, at their, in their workplaces, all that kind of for everyone. We've done, corporations, government, military, correctional facilities, educational, nonprofit. We even did a show a couple years ago for the Secret Service. And yeah, that was kind of interesting. They call me up, I get this call, and they're like, Mr. Granirer, it's the Secret Service. And I'm like, oh my God, how did you find out about me? And they're like, oh, we just did a random search. And I'm like, no, 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 no. The Secret Service does not do random searches. But it turns out it was a random search from one of their HR people. And so it was a virtual show. So we also do virtual shows. So like I say, if people want to continue performing, there's that opportunity. And not everyone does, but a decent chunk of people want to continue perform and develop their acts and do shows for other organizations. And it's great because it gets them to step outside of the stand up for mental health shows.
Hmm.
And I think it's great for their self esteem to go, wow, we just did a show for, I don't know, this corporation at their head office and we killed it. And that's just another level of mastery.
That's pretty cool. And so did you find out what the random search was that the Secret Service did?
Well, I don't know what they Googled actually. I never did find that out. But like I said, it was their HR person who contacted me, And yeah, it was a great. It was great. They were totally receptive. It was a wonderful audience.
So do you stay in touch with the people that go through your program, and or is there kind of like this whole other community that you've started to build of these people that, just kind of continue to support each other, plus they get the stand up?
Yeah, there's always every group I do, I always have a WhatsApp chat, and
Hmm.
so they can stay in touch well after the comedy is over, and they often do that. And also, we're on the usual social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and so often what I'll do with their permission, because obviously, I tell them you own the copyright to your material. No one can do anything without your permission. But
Hmm.
sometimes they give me permission, and I put their clips up on YouTube and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And so they get a lot of, sort of feedback and cross going back and forth with their fellow classmates.
And that, from a support standpoint for their mental health and stuff, it
Yeah.
does it create kind of this whole other family kind of
Yeah, for
group
those
that.
for those who want it, there's
Hmm.
there's there's always that option. Not everyone needs it. And the other thing too is that people who take my class, I would say 90% of them are not interested in becoming professional comics. They're doing it for other reasons. I mean, we've had one or two people who have gone on to become pros and headliners, but like I say, in general, these people want to take it for the confidence building, for they feel like they're being of service. They're
Hmm.
helping the community dispel stigma, and that's a really wonderful thing to feel like you're being of service. Uh,
Yes.
but like I say, in terms of going on and performing and getting on the comedy scene, which is pretty tough, um, I would say most of them are not interested in that.
Hmm. But it's skills that they learn that they can continue
Yeah,
to take on with them through life,
yeah,
and
yeah. And
that's
some of
great.
them do presentations, mental health presentations for different organizations, and now they have some transferable skills where they can go,
Mhm.
oh, I'm giving a presentation on, I don't know, um, I don't know, whatever it is they're doing. Now I can get some laughs. I can basically say to myself, it's not like I'm hoping that I'm spontaneously funny. It's like you can go through your presentation and go, great, I want 5 laughs here, I want 3 laughs down here, and they have the material and they can do it.
Mhm. Do you ever notice, like, in the audience with some of the stories that people tell, that like the look on their face, like, wow, I can't believe you said that, or they
Hmm.
all just kind of soak it in? And
I think both. I think people soak it in, but I also think there's times when people go, "Wow, I can't believe you taught." So, uh, I mean, people say, "Well, what's so funny about mental health?" And I say, just about everything. Um, there are some topics that just don't work. Like, for example, you know, like child abuse and stuff like that. It's just
Mhm.
I've never seen anyone make that funny. And who knows? Maybe there are comics out there who have figured out how to do that. There's always outliers. But people talk about all sorts of things. I mean, I talk in my act. I talk about my suicide attempt, and other people do. And I think sometimes the audience go, "Wow, I can't believe you're talking about that." Um, but as long as it's funny, it works. There's kind of this fine line between, I sort of say, there's a fine line between comedy and tragedy. And if you can get on the right side of that line, you can talk about almost anything.
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's wonderful. It's a great approach that you're taking, and I really think it's great. So, from the counselor side of you, is there anything that you just really wish the world would understand better about mental health and suicide prevention? Any any message you
Um,
want to make sure gets out there?
Well, I guess, in terms of mental health, um, like I say, you are, and people have heard this lots, you are not your diagnosis. Um, and I think it's really important to go out and find things. I mean, what I tell people is, so your therapist says, you should meditate for 15 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day. What about 10 minutes a day watching comedy, like on YouTube or whatever it is, stand up, silly cat videos, whatever it is. Um, that's something you can do for your mental health. And actually, it's interesting that in the UK and Britain, they have something called social prescribing, where doctors will actually prescribe comedy, like going to see a show, going to take an improv course or a stand up course or whatever it is. So they're basically realizing the power of comedy. And so, what I tell people is, in terms of their mental health, you are capable of watching 10 minutes of comedy a day, and who knows, maybe you can expand that to more. So I
Mhm.
think that's one of the message I would like to say. In terms of suicide, it's really tough because, once again, it's like you have that sneaky part of you that gets in your head and basically says, there's no point, there's nothing going my way, I may as well end it all. And it's really tough to deal with that part, especially when it's really strong and pervasive. And let's face it, um, suicide, feeling suicidal is both what's going on inside of you and, of course, what your situation is on the outside. Um, but I would say it's really important to reach out for help. And I know what's that line now? Is it 988?
988. Mm-hmm.
988 now. Um, yeah, pick up the phone and call 988. Especially when you're having those horrible, awful times in your life. And once again, um, if you can find humor, uh, and not necessarily your situation, but like I say, be able to watch some comedy, no matter how bad you're feeling, I think that can really help get you through. What they've discovered in Britain is that when someone watches a comedy show, they feel better for 24 hours. So it's not a cure,
No,
but
but laughter helps everything.
yeah, it's a coping mechanism.
Hmm.
And I know there were times, and I hear this all the time from people who take our class. They say, laughter and humor has got me through some of the toughest times I've ever been through. And I
Hmm.
think, in terms of watching a comedy video, that's available to pretty much everyone.
These days, with the
Yeah,
with the internet, it's right at your
yeah,
fingertips, right at your
yeah,
fingertips.
yeah.
So, anything else you'd like to add?
Um, No, I think that's about it. I can't think of it. I think we've pretty much covered everything that I want to say,
Okay.
and I think what you're doing is great because I think people need to hear this, and I know you have a whole bunch of people that you've interviewed, and people need to hear all those different perspectives.
Well, thank you, thank you. We're trying. If anybody comes to mind for you, just certainly let us know,
Mm,
and we'd welcome the interview.
cool.
Um, so what I love about your work is that you're not teaching people to hide their diagnosis. You're teaching
Nope.
them to own it, to shape it, to stand in front of
Yeah.
it, and maybe even to laugh with it. And that's power. So thank you for what you're doing and for being here
Welcome.
today. If today's conversation encouraged you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their diagnosis does not define their limits. You can learn more about our mission at glowforhopenfp.org. And remember, your story matters, you are not alone, and there is always hope. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Glow for Hope. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your mental wellness matters, and you are never alone. For more resources and support, visit glowforhopenfp.org. That's glowforhopenfp.org. Stay connected, stay hopeful, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining.
This podcast does not and is not intended to provide medical advice. The information presented on this podcast should not be interpreted or construed in any way as a replacement or substitution for medical advice. It is important that you discuss your condition, treatment options, or any questions that you may have with your doctor or healthcare provider.